Olga Shvetsova, mentor. He had never dreamed of the metro. For 20 years in a row, when he woke up, he saw the gloomy gray-brown tones that dominated the subway. A cruel disappointment after the blue sky above his head. Again, the dim light of the emergency lighting, from which you can't close your eyes, but only squint to see at least something 2 meters away from you. He also saw in his dreams a hand reaching out to him, scratched, with broken nails, fingers strained in the last possible effort to reach, and always a few millimeters were missing. He woke up. His heart was pounding like crazy. Its pounding echoed in his ears, drowning out all other sounds. He didn't have time. He couldn't. He didn't fulfill his duty as a rescuer. That day, the alarm sounded for him and his colleagues a little earlier than for the rest of the city's residents. Their driver turned the car around, ignoring all traffic rules, and the emergencies ministry team headed to the nearest metro station to properly organize an evacuation to a bomb shelter. Ha! What the hell of an evacuation? There was no more order in this crowd than in wild animals fleeing a forest fire. What could the rescuers do? They could only help the weak, bring to their senses the one who was confused, lift the one who fell in the crowd. In the end, he too was sucked into the metro. The gates closed behind him, and he was left standing on the platform trying to understand. What should he do now? It turned out that, as usual, his job, to set a dislocation, stop the bleeding, just sit next to a person, holding his hand. Emotional wounds sometimes hurt more than physical ones. He himself got off easy. Before, his life went in a vicious circle. Work, home, store, now, work, the food rations, work again and face down in the pillow, to dream about the past, to see the sun, the sky, the grass, to listen to the noise of the big city, or to clench his fingers in the air again, unable to reach his hand. He had been dreaming about it for 20 years. What would old Freud say about this? Sometimes a cigar is not a sign of latent homosexuality, but just a cigar, and he just feels completely helpless. People needed him for a whole year. And then, somehow, imperceptibly, everything got better. The subway stopped resembling a continuous emergency situation, and the abbreviation Emercom no longer sounded as proud and encouraging as before. He was not used to being superfluous and unnecessary. He was one of the first to ask to come to the surface. It is not difficult to be a hero when there is nothing special to lose. And you can't call it a feat. There were no creatures yet. The only danger was radiation and man-made factors. And when you have good protective suits, the risk of getting irradiated is minimal. But in the city it seemed that dead eyes were looking at you from all sides. The eyes of the unsaved. He was the only one from the first group of stalkers who managed to maintain at least an external semblance of calm. But that's when this dream began. Victor, instruct the newbie. Tell him what awaits him there. The checkpoint commander pushed the barely adult boy in the back. Well, you'll figure it out yourselves. He hadn't been out in the city for a long time. After a quarter of an hour of walking in a gas mask, he had nothing to breathe with. His head was spinning. He could lose consciousness from hypoxia. Age, what did he want? But he continued to train stalkers when asked. The guy frowned with all his might, trying to seem more serious and older than he was, but, according to Victor's calculations, he couldn't be more than 19. A snot-nosed brat. However, there was no choice. Everyone wanted to be stalkers, but there were fewer and fewer healthy young people in the metro who fit all the parameters. OZKs dangled from the newbies like rags on a clothesline, behind the lenses of gas masks. Childish curiosity. Stalkers, damn it. Do you have a name, young man? Mikhail Vasilyevich. You'll be Vasilyevich when the pimples disappear from your face. But for now, Mishka. When Mishka asked what it was like up there, he answered in one word, creepy. Victor left no one there, on the surface, and only mentioned his workmates who died in the line of duty. It was an accident that he was the one in the metro. His loneliness, which had previously seemed like a disadvantage, now turned into a feeling of peace. All he had was himself. He was afraid that having gained something, he would immediately lose it. In civilian life, Victor was an ordinary city rescuer, and he usually did not have to do anything more difficult than pull a child's limb out of a radiator or a drunk homeless person out of a manhole. He did not go out to clear rubble after building collapses, and he did not work on fires or floods. Therefore, sleep seemed a mystery to him. Why? Uncle Vitya, what are you teaching? Mishka was surprised, like all the previous newcomers, not seeing a machine gun on the table, but only a gas mask and a first aid kit. I can shoot, anyway. And I have no doubt that you can. And so far only at the shooting range. But as soon as you put a night vision device on a fogged-up gas mask, you'll immediately forget how. And it's stuffy in the OZK, hot. And your nose itches all the time, exactly when the creatures are nearby, and you can't move. You have to get used to this, too. It's better to comb your hair here for your own pleasure. Going up to the surface is not only a brave act from which pride bursts and girls throw themselves on your neck. It's like going into space or what? A person sees the stars above him, looks at the remains of a bygone civilization, and suddenly realizes that he was not born to live underground. And how, after all this, can he hide in a dark, rotten hole again? It's no longer possible to sit still. A person again comes to the surface until he stays there forever. Stalkers rarely die in their own bed. But no matter how much Victor intimidated the greenhorns, he could not dissuade a single one from going up. And they could no longer stop, just as pilots could not live without flying. It was akin to a drug. Why had he never felt this himself? The mood upon returning was like after a cemetery. Victor understood that he was an incorrigible pessimist, but that was precisely why he was asked to ground the newcomers a little, who believed that military glory awaited them there, and the especially practical ones, innumerable riches. There's nothing there, only darkness, the wind whistling through the ruins, and hungry predators. A person imagines everything else for himself, which is why stalkers described their trips so differently. Each saw what he wanted. Victor examined the new student again. I can teach you how to survive on the surface, how to breathe there, how to walk. Mishka was already bored. He looked into the first aid kit. He got bored of something quickly. Others held out longer. He won't make a good stalker. He doesn't have the right temperament. You need to be calmer. And the one who doesn't listen to me usually forgets to take the plug out of the gas mask filter. I'm listening. What should I do? First, put on your overalls and run 3 laps around the station. Here's a miracle in feathers, smiling at something else. He ran. No matter. Then he'll put on a gas mask, hang a machine gun on his back, and in a couple of days he'll get to a backpack with bricks. Let him get used to it. What kind of stalker is he without a bag of loot? And he, Victor, will also lay empty boxes on the road for him. Let him overcome obstacles. You're a sadist, Uncle Vitya. You still have to teach me, Greenhorn. The student has run far. Victor once again wiped Mishka's gas mask with a rag. Hard to learn. easy in a coffin. He teaches them something. Other mentors make fighters out of them. And then these runts leave after a month or two to get an official badge. Ungrateful bastards. If only one of them would come back. Well, their station budget doesn't provide for hired stalkers. They trained their own. The place is good. The radiation level is not as strong as in many other places. It would seem live and be happy and drag junk from the surface. No, it's like they have an awl below their backs. They can't sit here. As soon as there is no one to brag to, there is no stalker. Look for the next one. It's good that volunteers are not transferred. But he is not moving anywhere. He watched the noticeably tired Misha with his eyes. Victor himself can't run 100 steps now, even without chemical protection. A former rescuer, a former stalker. And the guy, probably, is already a former one. Uncle Vitya, aren't you bored? Another lap. And increase your speed, creatures. They are fast. He had a dream. Autumn leaves lay on the ground, bound by ice. As if it were already the end of October, the sun was still warm during the day, and in the evening the ground was winter cold. The leaves were different, light brown, oak rotten to blackness, poplar, and on top, golden birch, with small teeth along the edge and a few wormholes. He was surprised, even in his dream, that he remembered every little detail of what fallen leaves looked like. And some voice whispered in his ear, "This is your life." In his dream, he agreed with the voice. His autumn had already arrived. He did not even feel his own body, dissolved in this frozen motley carpet. But waking up, he was surprised. Why was there not a single bright red maple leaf there? Freud was a smart man, damn him. There is something unconscious in a person. There was nothing bright in life, and there are no maple leaves. And in general, if dreams have become more interesting than real life, a bad sign. First aid was very bad for all the greenhorns. If they are already twisting the bandage crookedly at the station, what will happen in combat conditions? Misha wrapped his mentor with a strip of cloth, like a mummy, and bandaged his own leg so that after 2 steps, the bandage fell off. Everyone is in a hurry somewhere. Well, of course, we are the most invulnerable. Nothing will happen to us for sure. But helping a comrade, that's a thing. Where does this come from in them? The confidence that they are the best will rise to the top and defeat all the monsters at once. Somehow, not a single one has coped with this task yet. Maybe if more of these impudent fellows are gathered together, then the youthful enthusiasm will do its job. No, that's nonsense. They don't know how to work in a team. Everyone wants to distinguish themselves. Uncle Vitya, why don't you have a family? A single man is worth his weight in gold these days. Victor didn't even know what to answer. The annoying Misha ignored all the rules of decency, asking such questions. But for some reason it didn't irritate him. He was really interested. In 2 weeks, he managed to ask almost the entire biography of the mentor. Don't worry, you'll get more girls. Maybe you'll get rid of your acne. That's nonsense, Uncle Vitya, outdated and unscientific. Just quickly put on your gas mask and shut up. He had to shout at his retreating back. Misha went on the next lap around the station, an incomprehensible guy. Either he was fooling around, or he really was a little badly brought up. The most unpleasant thing was that Misha's interest made Victor doubt whether he, the mentor, was living the right life. For this youngster, the answer to the question is not obvious. For some reason he asked it. No, it's time to tie up with these students. Otherwise he's becoming his own psychoanalyst, as if idiotic dreams weren't enough for him. But the greenhorn is holding up well, running and running, not begging for favors. Don't flap your hands. They should help you move, not cling to thin air. Tomorrow to the surface. The new Gagarin is ready. Let's go. Stop. That's enough for now. The guy was panting heavily, bent over and resting his palms on his shaking knees. And still, Uncle Vitya, why's there no family? He's so persistent. Give him an answer. Couldn't think of anything else during the race. It's good that he's so persistent. And it's bad that he's so stubborn. Well, to hell with him. He won't leave me alone. After I buried my parents, I brought home one. I came home from work the next day. The wardrobe was in the middle of the room. I thought the radiator was leaking. But in reality, it turns out that my furniture wasn't positioned according to feng shui. The wardrobe had been standing in its place for 30 years. It didn't bother anyone, but no. It was positioned incorrectly. Anyway, I explained to her that it was none of her business. A week later, she was getting ready to go home with her things. Misha had already straightened up, was listening attentively, but I doubt he understood anything. The guy is holding up well. He had a quick rest. Shouldn't we send him out for a couple more laps? That's enough, I guess. Why didn't you get married here? Don't bother asking questions. You'll go up tomorrow. Really? He ran off skipping, forgetting about his fatigue and the 4 bricks in his backpack. Wait, leave the gas mask. What a restless demon. You can only feel sorry for the one who will lead the greenhorn to the city tomorrow. He woke up in the middle of the night. His heart was pounding so hard that Victor was surprised he hadn't woken up the entire station with the noise. He couldn't reach it again. He couldn't see his hand any clearer. And the man's face was lost in some kind of fog. He went out to smoke, and a shadow quickly flashed by in the darkness. At first, Victor wanted to go back for the gun, but then he headed to the opposite edge of the platform to catch the student there. Misha didn't even have time to understand how his neck and arm ended up in the strong grip of the mentor. Are you crazy? Have you decided to become an Olympic champion? Uncle Vivitya. The guy started stuttering from fear. Victor hoped that it wouldn't be forever. How did you end up here? What difference does it make? The main thing is that you didn't hear anything. You, Misha, remember, you need to run, hear, and think at the same time. Have you seen the map of the area? That's what I was thinking about right now. Victor threw the cigarette butt onto the tracks, where it burned out in the darkness for a while like a red spark. Misha, such a bastard, ruined all my sleep with his athletic achievements, although there would be something to regret. Should I sit and talk to him? Or what? There used to be a small park not far from our station, and a clock hung on one of the lampposts, round ones with big numbers. Victor himself didn't understand whether he was thinking about it or saying it out loud. Like in the old movies, where they always waited for girls under the clock, but they were late. All you could see was the hands moving an hour, and then another hour. And how late was your girlfriend? Mine. She didn't show up at all. He spent 3 hours breathing fresh air, then gave up and went home. It's good that he didn't spend money on a bouquet. Maybe if he had bought that damn bouquet then, the girl would have come, and she didn't want to get involved with such a cheapskate. Go to bed, Misha. You won't be spending the next night at home. And you? I'll sit a little longer. Misha took a step back at first, but then came back. I can't sleep. As if he had told some revelation. Victor had never seen a greenhorn who wasn't nervous, and he himself hadn't either. "Why do you keep asking me about my family? Have you decided to put your mother in good hands?" Misha wanted to give another thoughtless and categorical answer, but he kept silent. Victor didn't ask again, afraid that the answer would be something like this. "Why would she need you, you old fart? Victor, how are you today? How? Sit down and let's go." As always, what happened? I didn't like the question. It smelled like overtime, and he already felt unwell this morning. His heart ached. But Kostik wouldn't ask for help in vain. That is, of course, Konstantin Semenovich, the checkpoint commander. "Well, if you don't agree to go to the city, then Mishka will have to wait a week. There's no one to accompany him. Kirill is busy with something else." Victor was silent, thinking about how to agree so that it would look like a refusal. He remembered Mishka's joyful, animated face when he heard the magic word, tomorrow. They gave the guy hope for something better. How can he take it back now, or at least postpone it? A tragedy for the greenhorn, his whole life down the drain with their damned teenage maximalism. For them, it's now or never. On the other hand, if they catch them sympathizing with the students now, it's the end of their reputation as a gloomy and indifferent person. Why, apart from Kiryuka and me, old and sick? Was there no one else? Victor grumbled, but Kostik wasn't listening, knowing this whole preface and epilogue in advance. "So you agree?" "Yes, but keep in mind, if I faint again, he won't even be able to drag me to the station by the legs, such a weakling." As soon as Victor saw his old OZK, he immediately remembered the nasty feeling of lack of air and ringing in his ears. But Mishka was standing next to him. There was no need to show him that he really didn't want to go to the surface. Or maybe he didn't notice anything, absorbed in his thoughts, as the hermetic seal would open in front of him, behind which terra incognita awaited. That terrible creaking of rusty, unlubricated mechanisms was heard again. Victor hadn't heard the overture to the opera called New Adventures of Stalker in it for a long time. However, he had always been a realist, and was now thinking about one thing: how not to suffocate in rubber product number 1 with a filter while still leaving the station. Victor searched the area with a flashlight, but even his suspicious nature couldn't find anything to complain about, so the mentor waved his hand at Mishka to follow him. And on the platform in front of the station lobby, the young guy stood motionless again. How many of them were like that? The first glance was at the half-ruined frame of a high-rise building opposite the exit. Then gradually, the head rises upward, and there, the sky and stars are visible through the clouds. You could make a statue out of them. There would be enough time. But he was not a sculptor, and he wouldn't be able to stand such stuffiness in a gas mask for long. Quietly cursing at Kiryuka, who was supposed to take his place now, Victor patted Mishka on the shoulder. "Have you settled in? Let's move on." He was envious, a little. The guy could still be surprised by something. The greenhorn had a million questions. He was mumbling something into his gas mask, but Victor could hardly hear him through the noise in his ears. He only hoped that Mishka was not just turning his head from side to side, but was also monitoring the situation. To tell in general terms what was where to go for fuel, which streets stalkers mostly traveled along. Victor managed to complete all this briefing in about 10 minutes. It was time to go back, but his legs wouldn't go. If he didn't give himself at least a short break, the greenhorn would really have to carry him on his back. And Victor was not used to complaining. "Stay here for now, look around, and I'll sit for a bit." The seat of the former foreign car was no longer soft. It sank under his weight, but it was still more comfortable than on a stone or a rusty bumper. His heart stopped jumping and twitching. It seemed that oxygen appeared in the air he inhaled. Victor was coming to his senses. How long had he been sitting here? Almost completely unconscious. Mishka's flashlight was nowhere to be seen. It had disappeared somewhere. Where? Pushing himself out of the car, he looked around, but not a single ray of light flashed in any alley. The yellow beak had been dragged away like the devil. "Idiot," Victor cursed, not knowing at whom. You can wander around the neighborhood at random for a long time. Intuition will not tell you anything here. Fortunately, a fresh boot print in the dust was found off the usual route. No one except Misha could have left this print. If only he had time. He hadn't seen this hole in the asphalt before. He hadn't been out for a long time. A lot had changed. But a cloud of dust was still visible above the edge of the hole, indicating to an attentive observer that the collapse had just happened. Victor ran 50 meters, without standing on ceremony with his chronic radiculitis, jumped forward and sliding on his stomach, stopped right at the edge of the hole. He even managed to be surprised. His aging muscles correctly calculated the force needed for such a risky landing. Misha was hanging in the beam of the flashlight right below him, his hands tightly gripping a rusty piece of iron protruding from the clay. Victor illuminated the bottom of the hole. There was water glistening and a palisade of reinforcement. If the greenhorn fell, he wouldn't get off with a dislocation or fracture. He had to pull him out. He extended his hand. "Hold on, blockhead. What the hell are you doing?" A cold sweat poured down his back. A few centimeters were missing. "Wait, I'll get you something now." He said it and realized that there was not a second to spare. He realized it by Mishka's eyes, by the way the guy suddenly started twitching and started to cling to the clay cliff with the toes of his boots. The iron pipe broke somewhere in the ground and began to slowly crawl out. "Don't move!" Victor saw that the student was almost in a panic. No one had prepared him for such a turn of events, either mentally or physically. The former stalker understood his state. The guy was walking calmly, and suddenly the ground slipped out from under his feet. His body instinctively managed to twist and stop the fall. As soon as he saw help in the face of his mentor, the support, which had seemed reliable before, failed. A little more, and the guy would fall down with this useless pipe in his arms. But if Misha did not stop kicking his legs, he would not last long. "Mikhail, can you hear me?" The youngster's eyes focused on his gas mask. It seemed he was starting to come to his senses. "Why did you climb up here?" Now that Mishka's boots had somehow found support, he stopped sliding down. If he could pull himself up on one hand, Victor would pull him out. But would he be able to? Pull-ups on a horizontal bar should be introduced into the stalker training program. What was he thinking about? Anything but the sharp rebar at the bottom of the pit. Victor put the flashlight on the edge of the hole, feeling for at least a small hole in the asphalt with one hand, and reaching out to Misha with the other. "Did you know about this hole?" "I knew." The youngster lowered his head guiltily, which cost him another couple of centimeters of sliding down to the water. "I wanted to see the park. I've never seen an old movie, and you talked about watches like that. And I've never seen a round watch. You'll see it again, I promise. Listen, now pull yourself up with all your might in one jerk. Stretch your hand up. Your right one." He only had one try, but Victor didn't say that. "Go ahead." Misha jerked so quickly that Victor's fingers clenched in a death grip not on his hand, but on the wrist of his thin, boyish hand. For some reason he didn't let go of the piece of iron, clinging to the hard ground with a piece, and trying to help his mentor. "Come on, drop that nasty thing. Hold on with your other hand." He forgot all about his shortness of breath and bad heart. He just asked, addressing no one in particular, not to let him die of a heart attack for a couple more minutes, and then it didn't matter. The piece of iron hit the bars at the bottom with a clang and splashed into the water. Pulling out skinny Misha turned out to be not at all difficult. Victor did not feel any lack of strength in his hands yet. Finding himself on solid ground, the youngster crawled away from the edge as quickly as he could. Now his head was spinning. There was not enough air. His heart was gurgling somewhere in the wrong place. Victor rolled over onto his back and closed his eyes. He had made it. He had reached it. Now he knew for sure he would never have this nasty dream again.